I remember the exact moment the first thread of my life began to unravel. It was early morning, the kind of quiet that only exists before the sun fully commits to the day. I was standing in my kitchen, pouring coffee, when a sharp alert broke the calm. It came from Madison's tablet left on the counter. She was upstairs in the shower, and I knew she'd be in there for at least 10 minutes, humming to herself while using that expensive coconut shampoo she insisted on. The screen woke up, casting a cold glow across the granite. A message preview appeared 12 words that nearly stopped my breathing. Send another $2,000 or your husband finds out your dirty little secret. My hand slipped. The coffee mug hit the counter hard, splashing across my wrist. I stared at the tablet, the words burning themselves into my mind. I'd just returned from a 3-day mission at Nellis, the kind of routine logistics work that kept me away often enough to make me appreciate the quiet moments at home. But lately, that quiet had felt different tense, like air before a coming storm. 2 mornings earlier, I'd noticed $5,000 missing from our joint account. Madison had waved it off with a smile that didn't meet her eyes. Just helping Sarah with rent, she'd said. You know how military wives look out for each other. But I knew every wife in our circle. There was no Sarah. As if to confirm the lie, the tablet buzzed again. Don't test me, Madison. I have photos. A local area code. Someone close. The shower shut off upstairs. Did you say something? Madison called down. I forced my voice level. Just talking to myself. Coffee's ready. But inside, everything had shifted. I'd spent my career training to stay calm under pressure, to think when emotions screamed for attention. That instinct took over now. By the time she came downstairs, dressed and smiling like everything was normal, I had already begun planning. The next morning, at my office on Peterson Air Force Base, I spread 6 months of bank statements across my desk. Patterns appeared quickly, small transfers to a service I didn't recognize, then larger sums. The $5,000 withdrawal was only the latest chapter in a story I hadn't realized was being written behind my back. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison. Going to lunch with the girls. Back around 3. Love you. I stared at the message, wondering when her words had stopped meaning anything. If she was hiding something, I needed proof, not assumptions. So I reached out to Marcus, an IT specialist I trusted. I need a GPS tracker, I told him. Small, reliable. He didn't ask why. 20 minutes later, he handed me a military-grade tracker no bigger than a coin. That evening, while Madison chatted on the phone in the living room, I slipped it into the lining of her oversized leather keychain. She never noticed. That night, she cooked my favorite meal. She wore the blue dress she usually saved for date nights. She touched my arm often, asked about my day, laughed too brightly. Her attempt at warmth felt staged, like she was reading from a script she didn't fully understand. Is everything perfect, Madison? I asked, watching her reaction closely. For a split second, fear flashed across her face, then it vanished behind a practiced smile. Of course. Why? No reason, I said, just wondering if there's anything you want to tell me. Her hand trembled as she reached for her water. Like what? Like why you're lying about the money. The silence that followed felt like standing on a fault line moments before it splits. She swallowed hard, eyes shining with tears that seemed real but came too quickly. It's complicated, she whispered. Uncomplicate it. She stood abruptly, brushing past me. I can't. Not yet, please. Just trust me. Trust, I repeated quietly. That's earned. She didn't answer. Moments later, I heard the bedroom door close upstairs. That was the moment I understood. Whatever this was, whatever she had entangled herself in, she had no intention of coming clean. So I leaned into what I knew: procedure, discipline, patience. If trust was gone, I'd rely on strategy. Over the following week, the GPS tracker revealed the truth. She refused to speak. Most of her routine stayed the same: trips to the commissary, the nail salon, coffee runs. But every Tuesday afternoon, something broke the pattern. She drove to a place called the Desert Winds Motel and stayed exactly 2 hours and 17 minutes. Thursday, she repeated the same trip. Friday, again. The cold clarity of data left no room for excuses. On Friday, I took a half day and drove to the motel myself. I parked behind a row of semi-trucks and waited. At 2:47 p.m., Madison's white Camry pulled in. Less than 2 minutes later, a black Chevy Silverado parked beside her. The man who stepped out was someone I knew well, Kyle Tripp, a defense contractor with base access, married to Serena, a woman who always greeted everyone with the kind of smile that hid more than it revealed. Kyle leaned into Madison's car window, speaking softly. Then he kissed her. Not a confused moment, not a goodbye. Something familiar. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel so hard that I felt the bones strain. But I stayed still. No confrontations in the heat of emotion. No impulsive choices. Just observation and memory, the core of every mission I had ever executed. They disappeared into room 127. When they emerged 2 hours later, they spoke urgently, their faces tight with tension. Madison wiped her cheeks. Kyle paced angrily before she drove off. I waited until both cars left, then stepped inside the motel office. The clerk barely looked up until I showed my military ID. A $50 bill loosened her memory. Kyle pays cash for a weekly rate, she said. Always with the same blonde. Tuesdays, Thursdays, sometimes Fridays. The final piece clicked into place. By the time I left the motel, one truth had replaced every lingering hope. My marriage was already gone. But there was something deeper behind the affair. Money, threats, someone who had photos and leverage. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a pattern, a system, and I was going to uncover every inch of it. After the motel clerk confirmed what I already knew, I drove home in a silence so heavy it felt like pressure on my chest. But anger wasn't my driving force anymore. Clarity was, the kind that comes when you finally stop trying to protect something that's already broken. My marriage had become a battlefield, one I hadn't realized I was standing in the middle of until the smoke cleared. So that weekend, I locked myself in my home office and treated the situation the only way I knew how, like an intelligence problem. When emotions get in the way, information becomes the map. I laid out bank statements, screenshots from the GPS tracker, photos of Kyle's truck, times, dates, mileage estimates. Patterns emerged, and those patterns told a much larger story. The strange payments my bank statements showed ST Services. I'd assumed it was some fake company or a shell identity. It wasn't until I dug deeper that the initials clicked with an almost audible snap. Street. Serena Tripp, Kyle's wife. Once I realized that, everything else fell into place. I searched for her online, something I hadn't thought to do before. Her social media painted a picture designed for appearances. Cheerful smiles, fitness photos, curated snapshots of her life as a Pilates instructor. But recently, the tone had shifted. There were quotes about betrayal and new beginnings. Photos of expensive jewelry and clothes she definitely didn't buy on a Pilates instructor's pay. Captions about treating yourself when others don't value you. It was a portrait of a woman who had discovered her husband's affair and decided she wasn't going to be humiliated quietly. Monday morning, I leveraged my access at the base to pull Kyle's employment records. Address, clearance level, duties. His home was in Falcon Ridge, about 20 minutes away, nice neighborhood, manicured lawns, the kind of place that looked peaceful from the outside. I drove through at sunset, watching the way shadows stretched across identical rooftops. Serena's white Mercedes sat in the driveway. The house looked intact, everything in its place, but I knew enough about appearances to understand they often hid chaos. 20 minutes later, Serena walked outside. She wore athletic clothing, her hair in a high ponytail, moving with practiced calm, but her face carried tension. She was unraveling too. She just hadn't let it show publicly. She drove to a coffee shop, grounded, and I followed at a distance. Inside, I positioned myself so I could see her laptop screen reflected in a glass partition behind her. She typed with fast, angry strokes an email with the subject line, "Final payment." I caught enough fragments to know I was right. She was the one demanding the money. She was escalating. This wasn't just revenge anymore. She was leveraging something that could destroy marriages and reputations. Not long after, she left and headed to a FedEx office. I waited a minute, then followed her inside, staying far enough back to avoid being noticed. She spent 10 minutes at one of the self-service kiosks, printing something, paying for a small parcel, sealing an envelope. After she left, I approached the clerk. "Military discount?" I asked, flashing my ID. He straightened immediately. Yes, sir. How can I help? The woman who just walked out, the one with the white Mercedes. Did she print anything? I need a general idea of the type of documents for an ongoing security matter. He hesitated. I'm really not supposed to. Son, I said quietly, this is part of an active investigation. That certainty, backed by a uniform, was all it took. He swallowed. Photos, sir, a stack of them, and a letter. That confirmation hit me harder than any blow could have. Photos, evidence, proof she was ready to expose Madison and Kyle publicly or privately for cash. I left the store with a different kind of urgency. Madison wasn't just cheating. She was being squeezed by a woman with nothing left to lose. And someone like that hurt, angry, and humiliated doesn't stop until they decide they're done. Tuesday arrived with storm clouds building over the mountains. I knew Madison's schedule, and I knew she'd be meeting Kyle again. I parked outside the Desert Winds Motel with binoculars and waited. Madison arrived first. She looked stressed, hands shaking as she parked. Kyle arrived minutes later. The two of them started arguing immediately. Even from a distance, I could see the agitation in their movements. Kyle paced. Madison wiped at her face, maybe crying. It was the first time I'd seen friction between them. That meant Serena's demands were working. After they went inside, I gave it 15 minutes, then walked toward the office. The same clerk looked up and gave a weary smile. They're fighting today, she said, as if we were regulars discussing weather. Not like their usual meetings. They look like they're about to tear each other apart. I slid another 50 across the counter. I need the room next to 127. She hesitated, glancing around. I really shouldn't. This involves national security, I said. And with that, she nodded and handed over the key. Room 126 smelled like old cigarette smoke and stale air. I pressed my ear to the wall. Their voices were muffled, but clear enough. Kyle sounded panicked. She has photos, Madison. She's been following us. She's not bluffing. Madison's voice cracked, but underneath it was something colder. What do we do? She wants 10,000. She won't stop. Kyle muttered something I couldn't catch. Then Madison said the line that made every muscle in my body tense. Then we stop her first. Kyle's breathing hitched. Madison, what are you saying? I'm saying, she replied, we make sure she can't hurt us anymore. Not ever. I backed away from the wall slowly, my heart pounding. That moment marked the shift from betrayal to danger. Whatever Madison had become, she was no longer the woman I married. And whatever she and Kyle were planning, it wasn't going to end quietly. I left the motel with shaking hands. Before I even reached my car, Madison texted, working late tonight. Don't wait up. I stared at the message, the lie so casual it felt surreal. She had no idea her words were a final threshold she'd stepped over. As I drove home through the thickening storm, one truth crystallized inside me. This wasn't about saving a marriage. It was about preventing a disaster, and I couldn't let it unfold unchecked. Driving home from the motel that afternoon, I couldn't quiet the echo of Madison's words. We make sure she can't hurt us anymore. It replayed over and over, each repetition sharpening into something far more sinister than anger or desperation. I'd expected lies. I'd expected betrayal, but plotting harm that crossed into territory I'd never imagined touching my life. My house felt foreign when I stepped inside, like a crime scene where nothing physical had happened yet, but everything already felt tainted. Every photo frame, every coffee mug, every piece of furniture we'd chosen together, none of it offered comfort. It all just reminded me of the life I thought I had, and the version of Madison I thought I knew. I poured myself a bourbon and sat at my desk, pulling up everything I could find on Serena Tripp. If Madison and Kyle truly meant what I heard, Serena wasn't just a threat. They saw her as an obstacle that needed removal. And obstacles, when fear and panic mix with bad judgment, can turn into targets. According to her social media, she taught Pilates at a studio called Serenity Fitness. She had a class every Tuesday at 7 p.m. It was already 6:15. I grabbed my keys. On the drive, rain clouds gathered in thick layers over Colorado Springs, carrying the same weight I felt pressing down on my thoughts. I replayed the motel conversation again. Madison's tone hadn't been emotional. It had been cold, calculated, as if she had already accepted a line most people would never cross. Serena needed to know. When I arrived at the studio, students were filing out with mats under their arms, laughing and chatting. Normalcy. A whole building full of people who had no idea one woman among them was standing on the edge of a dangerous cliff. Serena was the last to exit, her posture straight, her movements controlled, but her eyes looked tired like someone who hadn't slept in days. When I stepped toward her, she froze. "Mrs. Tripp," I said quietly. She spun, defensive. "Yes? I'm Captain Drew Halstead." I waited for recognition. It came slowly, followed by fear. "I don't know who you are," she said, clutching her water bottle, "or what you want." "You know exactly who I am," I replied. "My wife, your husband, the money you've been demanding, and the threats you've been sending." Her jaw tightened. "Are you recording me?" "No, I'm here to warn you." That made her falter. "Warn me? About what?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice. 2 hours ago, I overheard Madison and Kyle discussing how to handle you. They're not planning to keep paying. They're planning something worse. Serena's eyes widened. "You're lying." "I wish I were." She looked down, her hands shaking. The strength she projected online and in public wasn't here now. What I saw instead was a woman who'd tried to protect herself the only way she knew how and had pushed things too far. "Sit down," I said gently. There was a bench just outside the studio. Reluctantly, she lowered herself onto it. "I followed Kyle months ago," she began quietly. "I found the receipts, the hotel charges, the excuses that didn't add up. And then one day, I followed him all the way to that motel." Her voice trembled. "Do you know what it's like to watch your life collapse from the parking lot of a cheap building? I took photos because I needed proof, something I could hold in my hands instead of the lies he kept feeding me." "So you confronted Madison?" "No," she whispered. "I confronted Kyle. He denied everything, called me paranoid. It made me feel insane." She wiped her eyes. "So I sent the first message to Madison out of anger. I didn't even expect her to respond. But when she paid, I realized I could make him feel something close to what I felt." "How much?" I asked. 12,000, she admitted. "I planned to ask for 10 more and then stop. I just wanted them to feel it." "You need to understand," I said. "You've succeeded, but now they see you as a threat. They were talking about making sure you can't hurt them anymore." Their words, not mine. Serena stared at me, horrified. "What do I do?" "You go to the police, tonight. Tell them everything, your involvement, your evidence, your threats, all of it. I'll be arrested." "Possibly," I said, "but you'll be alive." She swallowed hard, then nodded slowly. "Why are you helping me? After everything I've done to your wife?" I met her gaze. "Because no one deserves what they're planning, and because stopping harm matters more than protecting someone who's already destroyed my trust." I gave her my card and told her to tell the police I'd testify about the motel conversation. Her hands trembled as she took it. "If you don't go to them," I warned. "I will, and I'll tell them everything." She nodded again, this time with conviction. When I drove home, night had fully fallen, and the storm finally broke open. Lightning cracked across the sky as rain hammered the windshield. I checked the GPS locator on Madison's keys. She wasn't home. She was at Kyle's house. At 11:47 p.m., as thunder rattled the windows, my phone rang. Detective Maria Santos from Colorado Springs PD. "We received a call from Serena Tripp," she said. "She claims you advised her to report an ongoing threat. Is that correct?" "Yes. We need your statement by morning. There are serious allegations." I asked the question that had been gnawing at me. "Where is my wife now?" "We don't know. Patrol units checked your residence and Kyle Tripp's. Vehicles gone. Both houses empty." A pause. "They're running Captain Halstead." The line went quiet for a moment before she continued. "We're issuing alerts for both of them, and we're sending units to protect Mrs. Tripp. Based on her report, we believe she may be in immediate danger." I looked out the window into the storm, the house dark and silent, my marriage in ruins, danger spreading like wildfire. "Detective," I said quietly, "that's the right call." And for the first time in months, despite everything collapsing around me, I felt a strange, steady calm. Because now the truth was out, and the consequences were finally coming. I barely slept that night. I sat in the living room, lights off, watching the rain streak across the windows while Madison's GPS dot remained pinned at Kyle's address. Hours passed without movement. My phone lit up several times, voicemails, texts from Madison ranging from pleas to anger to something close to threats, but I didn't answer. I forwarded everything to Detective Santos. By the time the sun finally pushed through the clouds, I knew one chapter of my life had already closed, even if the legal system hadn't caught up yet. The interview room at Colorado Springs PD smelled faintly of burnt coffee and disinfectant. Detective Santos sat across from me, recorder in front of her, eyes sharp with focus as she listened to every detail of my investigation, bank withdrawals, GPS data, the motel visits, the overheard conversation. She rarely interrupted, only occasionally clarifying dates or phrasing. She wasn't just listening for the story, she was building a case. When she asked whether I believed Madison and Kyle meant to harm Serena, I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said. That's exactly what they were discussing. She nodded grimly, noting something down. When the interview ended, she informed me patrol units had searched both Kyle's house and mine early that morning, no sign of either of them. Both vehicles missing, both phones turned off. They're avoiding detection, Santos said. We're issuing alerts now, and we've stationed officers at Mrs. Tripp's home and workplace. She's cooperating fully. I thanked her and left, though walking out of the station felt surreal, as if I were leaving a bunker after a blast. The sunlight felt too bright, the world too normal. Back at home, I packed boxes Madison's belongings first. I didn't want to keep anything of hers in the house, not anymore. I was taping the last box shut around 4 p.m. when the doorbell rang. I glanced through the peephole and saw two strangers, one tall man in a dark suit and a woman with steel-gray hair pulled tightly into a bun. The FBI. I opened the door. Captain Holstead, the woman said, flashing her credentials. Agent Rebecca Martinez. This is Agent David Chen. We need to speak with you regarding Kyle Tripp. I stepped aside and let them in. I'd expected something like this eventually. Kyle worked with defense logistics, and any crime involving someone with clearance usually triggered federal interest. But the look the agents shared before beginning told me this was worse than I'd imagined. Mr. Tripp has accessed restricted files over the past week, Chen said. Files unrelated to his assigned duties. What kind of files? I asked. Base security protocols, personnel records, transport schedules. The room seemed to shrink around me. You think he's trying to sell information? I asked. We're not ruling anything out, Martinez said. When people hit desperation, financial strain, relationship turmoil, potential criminal charges, they sometimes seek other solutions. I felt a cold pressure in my chest. If Kyle was spiraling and Madison was with him, the danger had expanded far beyond threats against Serena. Chen leaned forward. Captain, we know you've been tracking your wife's movements. Do you still have access to that data? I nodded and opened the tracking app. Madison's dot had finally moved. It was now stationary near Pueblo, over an hour south, at what looked like an industrial zone. Do you know the location? Martinez asked. No. It looks like abandoned warehouses. The agents exchanged a loaded glance, one that told me the next steps were already decided. Captain Holstead, Martinez said firmly, we need you to come with us. If Tripp is planning something, your wife may be in danger, regardless of her involvement. What kind of danger? I asked. The kind, she replied, where people don't survive. They didn't say anything else, and they didn't need to. We left immediately. The drive to Pueblo felt endless. The closer we got, the more the terrain shifted into empty lots and rusting buildings, long-abandoned remnants of a manufacturing district that had died years earlier. The FBI convoy stopped near a cluster of decaying warehouses. Behind one of them, partially hidden from the road, sat Kyle's Silverado and Madison's Camry. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. Martinez placed a hand on my shoulder. You stay in the vehicle. We can't risk you in there. I nodded, though every instinct in me wanted to run inside. The tactical team moved in with incredible precision, silent hand signals, coordinated positions, practiced caution. Through the comms radio in the armored SUV, I heard murmurs. Alpha team in position. No movement visible from the south window. Bravo team ready. Copy. On my mark. A beat. Go. The breach was loud enough to echo through the vehicle. A shout. A crash. Then silence. Seconds that felt like entire minutes. Then, Building secure. 2 subjects in custody. No weapons found. Chen exhaled. Martinez opened the door. They're bringing them out separately. I braced myself. Kyle appeared first. Hands zip-tied. Face pale. Clothing rumpled. Eyes hollow. He looked like someone who had aged a decade overnight, the weight of his choices crushing him. Madison came next. I barely recognized her. Her hair was tangled, makeup smeared, her expression twisted into something between fury and panic. When her eyes found me through the tinted window, anger flared so intensely it almost startled me. "You did this!" she screamed as agents held her arms. "You destroyed everything!" Chen stepped forward. "Mrs. Halstead, you're under arrest for extortion, conspiracy, and threatening a federal witness." Madison didn't hear him. She kept her eyes on me, voice cracking, words spilling out like poison. 13 years. 13 years I followed you from base to base. And what did I get? Nothing. Do you think I wanted any of this? I rolled down the window. "You knew who I was when we married," I said quietly. "And instead of talking to me, you chose lies. You chose destruction." "You don't understand," she shouted. She was never going to stop. Serena pushed and pushed. Martinez cut in sharply. "So you decided to make the problem disappear?" Madison froze. That moment of silence told the story better than any confession. Chen returned minutes later. "Tripp claims the entire plan was Madison's idea," he said. "He's offering cooperation for a reduced sentence." I watched them load Madison into a federal transport van, my wife, now a stranger, head bowed, shoulders shaking. The life we built had collapsed, piece by piece, until nothing recognizable remained. "What happens next?" I asked. "Federal charges," Martinez answered. "Severe ones." As the convoy pulled away, dust rising behind it, I stood alone in the abandoned lot. The storm clouds had drifted east, but the air still felt heavy. I didn't know what rebuilding would look like, or how long it would take, but I knew this. Truth had finally caught up to all of us, and there was no turning back. 6 months later, I stood in a federal courtroom wearing my dress blues, the familiar weight of the uniform grounding me the way nothing else in my life could anymore. The room was silent except for the soft shuffle of papers and the quiet murmurs of attorneys. When the bailiff announced Madison's name and she was led inside, I felt something shift inside me, an echo of a life that once existed but no longer belonged to me. I had braced myself for the sight of her, but it still struck harder than expected. Madison looked older, years older. The confident, meticulous woman I'd married was gone. In her place was someone hollowed out by choices she couldn't take back. Her hair, once carefully maintained, was now grown out with gray streaks showing. Her face looked drawn, almost gaunt, as if the consequences she was about to face had carved away every trace of who she used to be. Judge Patricia Hendricks read through the charges with a voice that carried the weight of absolute finality: conspiracy against a federal witness, extortion, accessory to theft of government property, conspiracy to commit harm. The words felt cold, heavy, clinical, yet each one pointed back to decisions Madison had made in moments she likely thought were desperate, moments when she thought she could outrun accountability. When the judge delivered the sentence, 25 years, there were no gasps, no dramatic reactions, just a quiet finality settling across the room like dust. Madison didn't look at me, not directly. She kept her eyes on some distant point past the judge's bench, as if refusing to fully accept the reality closing in around her. Kyle was sentenced right before her. 15 years. He'd cooperated with the investigation, and his testimony had inevitably painted Madison as the driving force behind their escalating actions. Whether that was entirely true or a convenient survival strategy on his part, I couldn't say. A part of me no longer cared. They had both made their choices. Serena received 4 months in minimum security and probation afterward. Her extortion charge was serious, but her cooperation had placed her on the right side of the line just in time. When she moved to Arizona after the release, she mailed me a postcard, a picture of a desert sunrise with a handwritten note. "Thank you for saving my life. I hope you find peace." I kept it in my desk drawer, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof that some part of this mess had resulted in someone being pulled back from the edge. Back on base, life didn't return to normal, it reshaped itself. Colonel Hayes had been true to her word. My position was waiting for me when I returned from emergency leave. and no one on my team treated me differently. If they knew the details, they kept their distance from my personal life, maintaining a level of respect and professionalism I was grateful for. The Air Force takes care of its own, but it also expects its own to uphold standards, especially integrity. I realized somewhere along the way that integrity wasn't about being perfect. It was about choosing the right path even when the cost was steep. I'd done that. Maybe not gracefully, maybe not without missteps, but I'd done it. The divorce was direct and mercifully quick. Madison had no leverage, no room to negotiate. I kept the house, the car, and what remained of our finances after the legal fees. Her attorney sent one final letter on her behalf. I hope you're happy with what you've done to us. I read it once, then set it aside. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Weeks passed, then months. The house grew quieter. Each room echoed differently when it was no longer full of shared routines, shared objects, shared plans. Some evenings I walked through it slowly, remembering moments that were real, even if everything after them wasn't. The Sunday mornings, she brought me coffee in bed. The weekend, we painted the kitchen. The nights we stayed up talking about postings and future bases. Those moments weren't lies. They were genuine chapters in a story that had taken a turn neither of us recognized, until it was too late. Then one morning, an email arrived. My reassignment orders, Ramstein Air Base, Germany, a promotion to major, a new environment, a clean slate, a place where no one would know my history unless I chose to tell them. It felt like a lifeline. The days leading up to my departure were a blur of preparation, selling my car, shipping my household goods, finalizing paperwork. On my last night in the empty house, Detective Santos called. Her voice was steady, as always. Captain Holstead, Madison's appeal was denied. The original sentence stands. I see, I said. She asked her attorney to pass along a message. I waited. She says she's sorry, for all of it. There was a long pause between us before I answered. Thank you for letting me know. I hung up and stood in the quiet house that had once held a marriage. I felt not relief, not anger, not vindication, just a kind of quiet understanding that life had moved forward without waiting for me to catch up. The next morning, I locked the front door for the last time and drove away. I didn't look back out of nostalgia, I looked back out of habit. Years of scanning for threats had ingrained vigilance into part of who I was, and in a strange way, it had saved me. As the plane lifted off from Colorado Springs, I watched the mountains fade beneath the clouds. They stood tall, eternal, unmoved by everything humans built or broke beneath them. Looking down, I realized that all the chaos, betrayal, fear, and consequences that had consumed my life were just temporary storms in a much bigger landscape. Somewhere below, Madison was facing the reality of her decisions. Serena was rebuilding in Arizona. Kyle was counting the years until parole, and I finally was headed toward something new. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I had the strength to build it, one honest step at a time. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.